wokeness stuff. And the one thing, if I could advise DeSantis, the one way I think he should modify the wokeness thing is it's not just about kindergartners. And I think people are too focused on the schools on that. What is wokeness? It's anti-white racism.
In this video, we sit down in a conversation between Ann Coulter, Dinesh D'Souza, and Tim Pool on his podcast, Timcast IRL. Their conversation centers around the ideal strategies and messaging of the Republican Party to continue to gain support. Tim Pool and Dinesh D'Souza offer their views on the topic, but ultimately, Ann Coulter makes the best case when articulating her position. With that, let's watch Ann Coulter destroy Tim Pool on his own show.
He didn't need the NRA. Turns out maybe he should have been afraid of the NRA.
So what gets those people back in the states that Trump needs to win, or what gets independent voters this year? Is there one issue that you think? I mean, I assume you're going to say immigration.
Of course, immigration. Of course, immigration, crime, transgenders. I mean, the wokeness stuff, and the one thing, if I could advise DeSantis, the one way I think he should modify the wokeness thing is it's not just about kindergartners. And I think people are too focused on the schools on that. What is wokeness? It's anti-white racism plus cartoons of anal sex. That's basically the full panoply of what it's the DIE bureaucracies. It's the race before merit thing. It's no longer deciding things on the basis of merit. It is the anti-white male hatred that animates the left.
But you said earlier in this very discussion that white people are the only group that have been taught to hate themselves.
I think they do it on their own.
All right, they do it on their own, and maybe they're taught to do it. But how do you think then running a campaign appealing to white people and saying, in effect, that there's this anti-white ideology in the country, how is that going to be a winning technique?
Well, manifestly, I don't think. I mean, if all white people were liberals, ooh, what a horrible, horrible thought. Then we wouldn't get a single
I'm saying
vote
working
in
class
any
white guys.
presidential
Working
election.
class white
they
guys.
They don't hate white people. No, the vast majority of white people don't hate themselves. There are enough in European countries. There are enough in this country to have suicidal immigration policies, to have suicidal hiring policies. If it were 100%, then literally you might as well go and commit suicide. Republicans would never win a single election. Nothing would happen anyplace. But no.
If you like watching videos like this, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
That obviously Trump got elected one time by appealing to mostly working class whites who hadn't voted for a long, long time. But mostly, I just think it's true, the anti-white racism. I think it's true, and it's hurting everyone. I'm worried about, the pilots they're hiring. I'm worried about the air traffic controllers they're hiring. It's destroying all of our lives, and they're treating black people like they're children and patting them on the head when they're the shoplifting and the carjacking. But I would make the wokeness anti-white racism, crime, and immigration.
What are you? What do you think are getting independents in particular to the polls?
I think that we just run a scorched earth campaign against Biden and what the Biden regime is doing. And
so what are the Biden regime's three biggest sins?
Well, its biggest sin now is a wholesale assault on the basic liberty of Americans. I mean, when I came to America in the 70s, I was a teenager, and there was a big political debate going on. But one of the things that really consoled me or relieved me about America, I'm like, look, there are certain basic rights. They're right there in the Bill of Rights. It's not a full compendium of our rights, but right to free speech, right to conscience, right to assemble. You can petition the government without fear for grievances, equal justice under the law. And I'm like, this is not up for political negotiation. It doesn't matter if 90% of people don't agree with me. They can't shut me up, right? So now we fast forward to now, and I say that within 2 or 3 years, all these basic rights, every single one of them, is in serious jeopardy. I'm not even sure with a straight face I could say that we are, in a pure sense, a free country anymore. Think of what the defining characteristics of tyrannical regimes are. Let's take North Korea, China, or the old Soviet Union. Mass surveillance of citizens, systematic censorship, wholesale indoctrination in the schools and the media, a one-party state. Police states are one-party states. They shut down the opposition. Doesn't mean they don't have elections. Iran has elections. China has elections, but it's a controlled opposition that's subordinate to the regime. Political prisoners, criminalization of dissent. And I say, wow, we have all that right now in this country. So that's the point of making a movie called Police State, is
Geesh, Dinesh, you are spitting some facts there. I've never been a sky is falling kind of person, mainly because I don't want to be like a Democrat that says the world's going to end and it's going to be climate change or Donald Trump or guns or whoever knows what they're saying this week. But the way Dinesh laid that out, you know, describing an authoritarian society and some of the characteristics, you can identify them pretty easy in what's going on today. I do choose to stay optimistic, however, because, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, I think people are inherently good, but they've just been lied to for so long, and I think a lot of Americans are waking up, and it really gives me a lot of hope to see that. By the way, full transparency, I'm a big Dinesh D'Souza fan. I like the guy. What do you guys think of him? So yeah, as far as Republican strategies, Ann Coulter goes to the big three and says immigration, crime, transgender, that's what you focus on. And again, she made me look at the whole idea of wokeness in a different way. You know, it's not just fighting and screaming about silly causes and safe spaces and pronouns. There really is an undertone of anti-white racism in it. And, you know, she said cartoons of a certain kind of sex. I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, but and the whole idea of race before merit and putting people in groups, yeah, that is wokeness. And over time, if adopted by more and more people, that would be a major contributing factor into taking down a society or a country. However, and let me know what you all think, but I am of the belief that enough people are just done with the wokeness stuff now. We're just, it's enough, and don't bother us with it anymore. I think if you're watching this, you've probably felt that way for a long time, but I think people that maybe were on the fence about it before are finally saying, all right, enough of this woke stuff. One thing before I get back to the video, I wish so badly that I was as articulate as Dinesh and Ann. They crystallized things really well. But Ann Coulter mentioned something that I have thought about forever, and I've mentioned it, but I just don't think I speak as well about it as she does. But what she said, in my words, is feel like the left was always the party of destruction and chaos and mobs and rioting, and they never had that to hold over our head. So aside from all the things that I don't like about January 6th, the violence, the physical attacks, especially on police officers, property damage, you know, I always thought that the right is above that. And I think we are ultimately, but it just takes one event like that. And she said something like, you know, I'll be on my deathbed and they'll be bringing up January 6th. And she's right. It's I've described it in other videos as it's just like the words racist or sexist to them. Now they've got January 6th in there too. All three of those are get out of a debate, I'm losing cards that they pull all the time. Because once they bring up one of those things, it puts the right-leaning person on the defensive. It just stops the conversation. Now you're onto that subject, and I see it all the time. The liberal that's typically losing the debate has now successfully deflected, and the Republican is on the defensive. You know what I mean? Anyway, this is a good conversation. Let's get back to it.
We're not there yet. Obviously, if we were a full-fledged police state, I couldn't make this movie. I mean, I'd be locked up right now. But we are headed in with great speed and unexpected rapidity toward a country in which none of our rights anymore are safe.
Do you feel like this is something that the average American is aware of, or do you think that, you know, inflation?
They know about January 6th.
Right. I was going to say, what issues distract people? It's not that I don't disagree with your point, but, you know, when you are talking about a voters, if you say your rights are being stripped away, is that more impactful to them than saying you can't pay for groceries this month because inflation is so high?
Well, yeah, it's not one or the other, right? I mean, just like you can run on the economy and you can run on the transgender issue. One doesn't contradict the other, but I think you have to. I mean, the reason to make a film is to do a wake-up call for people who are not woken up, right? If they were already woken up, the film is, in a sense, pointless. I kind of feel like the animal who's, sees the predator in the trees. I'm trying to warn the herd. But the ordinary guy is saying, no. The ordinary guy goes, I'm not Trump. And, I didn't go in the Capitol on January 6th. And I pay my taxes. So, I'm never going to have the FBI come smashing through my door. And my point is, you could not be more wrong.
Sure.
Because this thing has devolved very quickly in a short time.
Although it's awful what was done to the January 6th protesters, and people should know about it, certainly people who watch this podcast and be annoyed by it. By and large, I would avoid bringing up January 6th. I wrote a book on mobs, demonic. They're always, always dangerous. It's the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. And when I wrote that book, and up until January 6th, I could say without fear of contradiction, there has never been a right-wing mob. And January 6th, I understand why people thought it was Antifa at first. I understand why the Capitol policeman said, no, we don't need, or I don't know, Nancy Pelosi, the rest of them, they weren't bringing in. There hadn't been a right-wing mob before. And now there's finally been one. And we're all going to be in the nursing home someday. And they're still going to be talking about January 6th. Mm-hmm.
Looks like I got a little ahead of myself there. I pre-watched this video, so I guess I beat her to the punch on my January 6th comments. But I really like the conversation they were having when Dinesh was describing a potential doomsday scenario, down the road, and that he's trying to warn people, but, people are like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. And one of Tim Pool's co-hosts asked, well, what's distracting people from those things? And they talked about paying for groceries and they talked about paying for groceries and just living your daily life, and those things distracting people as their rights are eroded. But I think the psychology behind that, maybe they were inferring this, but I don't think they really said it out loud. To me, it's like, what's affecting me and my family the most right this minute? And for a lot of people, it's paying for groceries, paying for gas, paying for rent. I mean, those are things that, trust me, I know all too well. When you're in that moment, it is all you can think about, and all you're trying to do is pay that bill so you get that sense of relief, and then it's, 30 days until the next one, and when you're really struggling to pay, it's on your mind all the time. Unlike, however, the concept of rights slowly being stripped away over time, even people that are fully aware of it, with all of the other concerns that I just talked about, may say to themselves, well, let me just get through, this tough period of paying for bills and doing what I can to get by. And then when things are better, then I can focus on that stuff because, it's down the road a little bit. So my point is, Trump ran on the economy, crime, and immigration. Those are three things that people are feeling the effects of right now at this moment in time. If he had run on what Dinesh suggests, like a scorched earth attack against Biden and how his administration is stripping away all of our rights, while I completely agree with Dinesh, unfortunately, I don't think it would have been all that effective, because that's not what people feel, at least, like they need addressed immediately. But to be clear, I agree with everything that everyone said throughout this entire conversation. There's just different ways of approaching things. But again, I think Ann Coulter's approach makes the most sense, and it is, in fact, what helped propel Trump to win the election. Let's get back to the video.
Not reflect well on us They were idiots. They shouldn't have gone to prison for 2 life terms and so on and so forth. What was done to Enrique Tarrio, absolutely outrageous. But generally, I'd avoid talking about
Why
it.
be so deferential to the left?
Because I don't think it helps us for people to remember what happened on January 6th. I think that scares independents. I think it scares suburban moms. I think it pisses off a lot of Republicans. I mean, it kind of pisses me off, both sides, that they did it. And then the wild, crazy overreaction. I mean, my last book was Resistance is Futile. And the point of it was, we're never, ever going to get away from it. Trump does something dumb. And then the left has such a crazy overreaction. I end up coming to his defense.
Yep.
No, he said something dumb, but he didn't kill 3 nuns. No MSNBC. He didn't nail a kitten to church doors. And they keep overreacting and forcing me to defend whether it's Trump or the January 6th people. Your reaction is so out of proportion to everything that just happened. You're making me switch sides here.
So the issue for me is that politics means very little if the attitude everyone's going to have is when the left cries, we answer. Why? If they come out and they're like, Trump said a naughty word, I'll say, you're a moron, have a nice day.
Yes.
The stories you're putting forward are meaningless to me.
Yes.
It's every single time there's a story that if something happens, and let's say there's a story that Andy No tweeted about. A swastika appeared on some cars in a black neighborhood. The left went nuts, started screaming about it. Turns out it was a black man who did it. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
if the anti-establishment forces, conservatives, the right, libertarians, do not put all of their energy into cultural domination, it's pointless, because the conversation we end up having is Donald Trump said a thing that was innocuous and it became front page news, and we all must answer for it. No. Now it's start setting the news cycle. We need to set the we've been doing it quite a bit. I should say, I mean, we as an anti-establishment forces, calling out Joe Biden on Burisma and keeping Hunter Biden in the spotlight, forcing them to answer to us.
Exactly. And I think also what happens with things like January 6th is a kind of, the smoke arises and a narrative appears, and even we who know that the narrative is false start believing it. So, for example, they wanted to stop the count. Well, no, what was actually going on in January 6th in that building was challenging the election. That was the count that was stopped. It was the challenge that was stopped. So did the people who go into that building, were they trying to stop the challenge? No. The Democrats actually had an incentive to stop the challenges. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the challenges were stopped, because right after January 6th, it's like, okay, let's just go quickly and certify Joe Biden. So now you begin to see that the other side has a motive for having those people in the building.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
it
you
was
discover
a more convoluted fire alarm.
Exactly. So the January 6th committee knows all this, and they're like, listen, we can't let this cat out of the bag. So we need to construct a careful public narrative and make sure everybody signs on the dotted line.
And
They want people thinking about January 6th. They want to keep showing those videos, because every time those videos are shown, no matter what,
I don't really understand Tim's point there when he said to Ann, when she's talking about just staying away from the topic of January 6th, he said, why be so deferential to the left? I don't think that's deferential. I think it's self-preservation, because the left has pearl clutched so much over January 6th and scared the you-know-what out of average everyday Americans, especially ones that don't pay that close attention to politics. And they've created this entire narrative about it, about what monsters the right wing is. So, like I mentioned earlier, when challenged on it, it's okay to talk about it and address it, but move on. And I think most rational people on the right denounce January 6th, so do that and move on. But trying to argue it back and forth is a waste of time, because the more we do, the more we feed into the left's narrative that they've created around it. Anyway, I thought this was a really interesting discussion about messaging and how to best get through to voters. But we want to know what you think. Did you think that Ann Coulter or Dinesh D'Souza had a particularly stronger argument? Do you agree with both of them? Let us know. Anyway, that's it for this video. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.